So I think we're like good to start. Because I wanted to talk a little bit about stuff I wanted to do for the channel too. And I was thinking of the Wednesdays that I do stream, because I'm starting to stream a couple Wednesdays in the evening, to do like a side series that I was gonna call something like dusting cartridges or something, because I have a ton of NES games, SNES games, and Game Boy games and Game Boy Color games that I've never actually played that are just in my collection. And I want to like spend just an evening playing through them. And if I play through like a significant amount, I can, talk about putting them on an end of the year tier list or something. So, I have to think about games that I don't finish, but I still have a background enough to talk about and like include on a list like this. Because I do have a couple multiplayer games like Lethal Company on the list, because of course I do. I played a total of 50 games this year, which is an improvement from last year. I played, I think, around like 45 last year. I didn't play a lot of RPGs. You can see that the main turn-based RPGs, the things that I'm known for. I played Metaphor this year. I played Mario RPG. I played Diamond and Pearl remakes. And that seems... Oh, I played Persona 3 Reload. Very important. And I played the Pokemon Scarlet and Violet DLC. That's on here as well. But there's a lot of RPGs I'll probably try to prioritize next year. Like, I know the Dragon Quest 3 remake came out, because I played the original Dragon Quest 1 and 2 on iOS, because it was like a very convenient way to play those games. So I saw by the time I was about to start the third one is when they first teased the remake, the HD 2D Dragon Quest 3. So I was like, oh, I'll just wait for that. But now it's like a bigger commitment because it's like a bigger game. So I'll have to like put some time aside. I want to play some more Final Fantasy games because I considered for the channel playing at least one Final Fantasy game a year in order. So like I made a video on Final Fantasy 1 and I really liked how it turned out. So it's like, oh, the next year happens, I play Final Fantasy 2, I make a video on that. Next year's 3, do that. But I haven't been doing that. Like, maybe we'll get the Final Fantasy 2 next year, among some others. Yeah, I actually played a couple games that you did videos on. So, Cosmic Wheel Sisterhood, I was already interested in because they made Red Strings Club. And I really like the composer, Fingerspit, who does the soundtrack for Cosmic Wheel and Red Strings. So, I did manage to play that. It was really good. And of course, I played Indica. You did a video on Indica. So what we're doing today is we're doing a tier list on every game that I played this year. And what I've done in the past is make it a personal tier list. I want to kind of like refocus it on stuff that I would like to recommend. Like, if something's going to be S tier on the tier list, it's going to be because I want you to play it really bad. If it's low on the tier list, I think it's a waste of time. That kind of a thing. And we're going to add... I don't think we need to go F tier. We might have to add some extra tiers, but for now, we're going to do S through E. S tier is self-explanatory. S tier is like something that is life-changing for me that I want to pass on the experience to you. A and B tier... great games, right? It's just not S tier, A tier. C is the middle ground. C is something that's neutral, something that I don't necessarily like or dislike, but was a time. The only time things on this list start to get negative is when they hit D and E. D is when things start to feel like a waste of time, where it's like actively something I wouldn't want to recommend. And then E tier, bottom of the tier. Not a good game. Something I didn't enjoy, something I don't want other people to play. We could start tough. I see Castlevania is here at the beginning, and we're definitely going to be moving some stuff around once I have stuff to compare. I played all 3 Game Boy Advance Castlevania games this year. And I think in order, let's throw them up here in order of themselves first. So Castlevania, I don't remember all of the names. Circle of the Moon was the first one. That's this one right here. Harmony of Dissonance is this one right here. Aria of Sorrow is this one right here. So this is the release order. I played them in order when I played through them. And Circle of the Moon was okay. It felt really like... A thing with Castlevania is the NES games are very influential, but also very difficult and very like restrictive in their movement and stuff. So between NES Castlevania games and Symphony of the Night onward, where they had a bigger focus on movement, Castlevania Circle of the Moon felt like the former. It felt like I was playing an NES Castlevania game as a Metroidvania. And like, it was fine, it was good. I think it was the weaker of the two. I think Harmony of Dissonance is my favorite of the three. I think that one was the most solid experience. That one had really fun movement between like the left and right trigger being dashing. The thing that Aria of Sorrow does is do like a soft reboot of Castlevania. It has brand new characters, it has like a reimagined story. It's like a it's like how Final Fantasy games are sequels in tone and theme, but not in like direct storyline. So when it comes to like classic Castlevania, I don't really resonate with like the original characters so much for like not any particular reason. But Aria of Sorrow putting like a fresh new cast with like fresh new relationships to each other, I think that definitely put it above the list. So I don't really know where I want to put them. I know how I want to compare them, but I don't know where I want to put them. I'm going to stick them in B for now and maybe move them up to A. Because they're all very good experiences. They're all very influential. So like another comparison between these three games and Symphony of the Night. Symphony of the Night is very fun to play, but it doesn't feel very like balanced in terms of like leveling up the character and getting more health and magic upgrades. The game gets like too easy too quick. And I think these games are better games because they're balanced better. Symphony of the Night has a lot more going for it in presentation and it being on the PlayStation, which makes me really happy that they're doing the DS collection. That comes out, I think that's already out digitally, but I have the pre-order. It'll come out sometime this year in 2025. So I'm hoping that with the DS hardware, anything that might have been a complaint in this trilogy will be like a thing of the past because of the better hardware in the DS ones. I did a video this year on Rez, and it honestly is my favorite video I've ever put out. Tetsuya Mizuguchi is a very interesting director who made stuff like Rez, Every Extra Extends. Let's gather them up. We can do that together. Child of Eden. He did Rez Infinite. I guess I didn't put all of his stuff on here. There's Humanity. He did Humanity. I played a lot of smaller games. I think I just chose not to put them on the list because there's not too much to talk about. Every Extra Extends, Child of Eden, and Rez Infinite, and Humanity. Aside from Tetris Effect, which I replayed this year, but I also didn't put on this list. Tetris Effect was an S tier for me. It was like a very memorable reframing of Tetris. It's insane how you can take something like Tetris and just change the presentation a little bit and have it be one of my favorite games I've ever played. And so the whole like thought process for Mizuguchi is combining music with video games, but not like making a rhythm game, but making like a musical experience. And I think he does a really good job in all of his games, kind of like making a video game, but also making something that like your input interacts with the music in cool ways. So Every Extra Extend is an arcadey game. You're essentially You're essentially playing a reverse, like a reverse bullet hell, where you're moving a ship around, and you're supposed to not get hit, but you're supposed to blow up your ship to cause a chain reaction of explosions to build combos. And it has such this addicting gameplay loop that it became my favorite game of the like smaller Tetsuya Mizuguchi directed games, which is why it's on this list opposed to some of the other ones that I played that were maybe a little less memorable, but maybe something I still could have like put on here to talk about. Every Extra Extend, again, for being a short arcade experience, was a really addicting gameplay loop. Specifically the PSP version, because there's different versions of the game. If you have the choice, definitely seek out the PSP version. That's the most like polished and aesthetically cool version of the game to play. Rez Infinite started as a Dreamcast game and got ported to PlayStation 2, got ported to, I think from there it went to 360, then it went to PlayStation 4, then it went to PlayStation 5, it went to PlayStation VR. So this is a game that's been like remade a ton of times. And another, I can explain all of these games in one go, it's just like that whole musical experience thing. Rez Infinite plays like a rail shooter with that same kind of flair of the other Mizuguchi games. It's definitely really good. I kind of like want to put it in high B tier for now. And Child of Eden is essentially a spiritual successor to Rez Infinite. We're just trying to do the same thing, just using its main gimmick was using the PlayStation Move or the Kinect in order to do like control or involve yourself in the game. I think that one is about the same, right under Rez Infinite. Humanity was really cool. Humanity is definitely a game I would recommend. It's primarily a puzzle game, but the way that the game evolves over time while still following the framework of the puzzle game that it started as is so cool to see in action. Like I want to recommend this game to Jack specifically, who's in chat right now. I really feel like this is a game that like you would sink a lot of hours into, and you just get floored with like how creative the game is. That one, I think that would go in high B tier as well. The other thing too is it's not necessarily the most interesting game for me. I'm not as much of a fan of puzzle games, but the same flair that went into Rez Infinite, Child of Eden, and Every Extra Extend is the same thing that made it like a memorable experience for me. Guitar Hero, I talked a little bit earlier this year how I'm doing a Guitar Hero challenge for myself, and I want to turn it into a video that doubles as a Guitar Hero retrospective and also is like a challenge video. So growing up, there was like Guitar Hero was a really influential part in my in me growing up. As soon as I got my Wii, they finally released Guitar Hero multi-platform, and I was able to just like really get addicted to Guitar Hero. And I've always wanted to be Through the Fire and Flames on Expert, and I got so close to it back in my heyday. Didn't work out. I flubbed it at the end. So now, as like a bucket list gaming challenge, I want to 5-star every song in every Guitar Hero. And now I'm doing that in order. So a little bit of a progress update. The Guitar Hero games that I finished are on this list. It's Guitar Hero 1, Guitar Hero Rock the 80s, and Guitar Hero 2. I'm currently on Guitar Hero 3, doing the deed of trying to complete and 5-star Through the Fire and Flames, which is... it's tough. I'm excited for the Guitar Hero video too, but it's going to take a while because I have to be good at Guitar Hero in order to finish all the games. So I would love to finish it this year. It's nice that I got 3 games off of the list. Guitar Hero 3 I think is going to be the hardest challenge, and I think it's going to go downhill from there. I hope so. The games tend to get better mechanically and game feel wise with each entry, which goes into the segue of me ranking them. Guitar Hero 1 is the start of a franchise, but man, the game feel is awful. The hammer-on and pull-off mechanics that are a staple in the games, they're so bad in the first game, and it just, like, actually ruined my experience going back and playing the first one. Now, the base framework of Guitar Hero is amazing, but Guitar Hero, the original, is gonna be a worse experience than Rock the 80s and 2. So, like, maybe it's silly, but, like, Guitar Hero is such a legendary thing that I think everybody needs to play at least once in their life. So it's gonna be an S tier game, but I'm gonna dock the first Guitar Hero a tier because of how bad it sucks mechanically. Yeah, Guitar Hero 3 was an interesting thing. Like, it's the game that sold the most, and it sold the most, I think, in part because it was the first multi-platform Guitar Hero, and it was like the heyday of Guitar Hero. But after that, I just kept playing them. Like, I went to World Tour, I skipped over 5 and Band Hero, and then I went back when they did Warriors of Rock, which was the last traditional playing Guitar Hero. So hard for me to rate the Guitar Hero games while separating them from their set lists. Yeah, and that's always going to be a subjective thing. I think the important thing in this tier list is just recognizing the series for what it is and being like, regardless of the set list, the concept of Guitar Hero is something that, like, impacted a generation. It made me who I am today, you know? I'm gonna pick and choose some of these. Harvestella will be a later one, because that's a conversation. Oh, I also played Jusant. That's another game that I played because of Game Thoughts. The Game Thoughts special. I mean, here's an easy one. Lethal Company, I waited, like maybe 6 months before I actually started playing, but I fell in love with it. Lethal Company is absolutely one of the best multiplayer games I've ever played. Just the pure fun of playing a 4-player co-op game with what's it, spatial voice chat, and just how, like, quirky and fun it is, how, like, healthy the mod scene is. Lethal Company, absolutely S tier. If you have a group of 4 or more with proximity chat, there you go. What I like, spatial chat? Close enough, right? Yeah, we do. I saw your video where you played some Lethal Company, so I'm excited. Now I know you have the game, so now there's no excuses. But yeah, Lethal Company is a great time. It's simple, it's fun, it's addictive. Like, and it's one of those games where you make the experience. You're doing the same thing every time you start up a new game of Lethal Company. But, like, how you interact with your friends when you play it together, how you die, is going to be, like, fresh and new every time. I think the game is still in early access, so I've been delving into mods. Very light mods, where it's just adding more monsters or adding more interiors to the game. Those are, like, the 2 main mods that I do. And I think that mods solve the only problem that I have with Lethal Company currently, is the amount of variety. So considering it's in early access and that they're going to add more stuff, like, it's Lethal Company, perfect experience, no notes. Lurking and listening while at the office. Nice, nice. Thank you very much. This tier list is definitely top loaded. I think we need to pick a bad game in order to level it out. I don't think I have a lot. Except for Mega Man X5. We'll get to that. Yeah, I played a lot of good games this year. Okay, yeah, let's do some bad games. Harvestella, I played through the entire game from beginning to end. It is the full length of a traditional RPG, which means it's like 80 to 100 hours. I put my time in. I think I can complain about this game. It's one of the most beautiful games I've played. Like, I love the art style, and I love the environment, and I love the character portraits that are in the game. The whole concept is it's a it's a combination of farming and action RPG. And I think it kind of fumbles the bag in its storytelling. It relies on a lot of tropes, which kind of sucks to say because, like, as an example, like, oh, you're playing, like, in a world void of technology, but it turns out that, like, ancient technology was, like, a future, like future technology existed and then went extinct. Or, like, a simpler one, like, the main villain was actually a good guy the whole time. Like, you're spending the whole time fighting the bad guy and it turns out he's actually a good guy. Like, just those kind of, like, surface level tropes I feel like Harvestella fell into. Another thing is its pacing. It's really weird because it tries to do the Persona thing. Like, it invites a little bit of Persona comparison, which is unfair, I know. But I can do it in order to explain the pacing. So Persona games are very particular because you're not leveling a social link back to back to back to back to back. There's stuff that blocks you from progressing your social link with, like, your stats and progressing the story. And Harvestella doesn't really have that same thing. And you're also supposed to be tackling a dungeon within a month's time where characters go through character growth during that dungeon, whatever. It's this normal way to structure things. So Harvestella, since it's an action RPG, you can kind of just play through the entire dungeon in like a day or two, and the characters go through their complete arc within that time. Like, there's nothing else to talk about once that arc is done. They don't really have the same kind of involvement as, like, characters in other RPGs. And you can do their social link pretty quickly. So there's this one character, I think it's the second main dungeon, where I played through his dungeon, and it's like, hi, hello, you just met me. And then, like, 2 days later, it's like, so much character growth has happened in so little time that I feel like taken aback about, like, how much you're willing to kind of, like, instill in me for, like, hey, we just met a week ago. I'm sorry to hear about all these, like, life-changing events that happened in, like, 2 days, and now your arc's done, and now we do the same thing with the other characters. Can you talk about Buckshot next? I can. No MVC collection. I'm not... That's the thing I was talking about earlier. There's a couple multiplayer games and games that I didn't play enough for me to give a good take. Like, I don't really get to rank the MVC collection when I've only played it twice with you. Mario Party is something I could have put on the list, but something I didn't. Trying to remember, did we play No One Lives Under the Light? So you played that one. That's why I didn't put it on the list. I watched you play it. What's up, Chuck Storm? But I did put Squirrel Stapler on the list because we played that, and I played it. Buckshot Roulette, we can talk about. But briefly, Harvestella. I didn't like the pacing of the writing. The pacing took me out of the experience. I don't really like action RPGs. I think it was very surface level with its combat. It ended up feeling like a single player MMO kind of experience, only when you fight bosses. Everything else was just, like, kind of average surface level action RPG combat where, like, none of your moment to moment. So, like, the peak of action RPG combat for me is something like Nier Automata, where it feels primarily like an action game, but you're still engaging with RPG chips to boost your stats, and you're still choosing what pods you want to use or what weapons you want to use. The weaker end of that spectrum is something like Harvestella, where you're just, like, looking at cooldowns, waiting for them to go down so that, like, the health bar, the, like, huge spongy health bar goes down a little bit, like, faster. And it's just not my speed. The farming was fine. It was very surface level. But, like, it doesn't really engage with the rest of the game. So like, back to positives. There were some cool things about farming, harvesting your crops, and cooking meals that you have to use in order to get health back in dungeons. I think that was a really good blend of the farming and RPG mechanics. But the negatives far outweigh the positives for me, where, like, this is something I was actively, like, not enjoying playing all the way through. Like, it felt like a waste of time. I think there's better stories out there. If you want something chill to turn your brain off, it's definitely a good game. It's a very beautiful game. But, like, that's about it in terms of, like, what I think the game has to offer. Buckshot Roulette's cool. I don't entirely remember the background of the game. It was inspired by Inscryption, which is also on this list. And I believe it was made by one person. It kind of blew up in the, like, influencer sphere, where, like, a lot of people were playing Buckshot Roulette. It's a really fun, very short experience, and it's flavored in such a cool way. You essentially, like, wake up in a bathroom, probably from, like, a drug-induced stupor, and you walk into a room, suitcase full of money. You need to play Russian roulette with a shotgun, and it's cool because there's a lot of different strategies depending on the items that you get. So there's 3 different levels. They're all very short, and with each level you get access to different items, and you get access to, like, a different mechanic. In the 3rd level, there's, like, health that you can't recover. It's a very short but very, very solid experience, and I think since I've played, they've added an endless mode. And it's more of like hey, this is a cool little proof of concept. It does exactly what it needs to do. It doesn't need to do anything more. I'd be excited. Like, I came, I saw, I enjoyed. I want to see what this person makes next. So it's absolutely like an A tier. I would even, let's shade the first Guitar Hero more. It's going to go at the bottom of A tier from now on. I think Buckshot Roulette is fantastic. I think every extend extra is like a sleeper hit. These are both, all 3 of these are kind of like arcadey experiences. I think this is just the most underrated, is every extend extra. Buckshot Roulette is, like, right behind it. And then we shade Guitar Hero for having, like, the first Guitar Hero for having, like, bad game feel. They added a multiplayer mode in Buckshot? I didn't know that. Buckshot's also a cheap game. You can find it on itch. I'm assuming it's on Steam by now. But when I played it with a buddy, it's $3 on itch right now. Absolutely, like, it's in A tier. It's a high recommend for me. Inscryption, I'm gonna talk about because Buckshot was inspired by Inscryption. It plays very similarly, where instead of Russian roulette, it's essentially a deck building game, which I really like. And the cool thing about Inscryption is, so the main premise, you're trapped in a cabin. You wake up, you're trapped in a cabin. You need to get out. There's this creepy face that wants to play cards with you, and so you're unlocking new cards every time you play. So it's a roguelike where you're meant to play it. You're meant to just keep playing it, unlocking more stuff, and the game lets you break the game. This is the kind of roguelike card deck builder where you're incentivized to just make broken combos and beat the game using those. For an example, there's a poison mechanic that after a turn will KO any enemy. I KO'd the final boss twice using poison when the boss has, like, you know, like 1,000 HP or something stupid. I was able to break the game, and it lets you do that. And it even lets you modify existing cards. So if you get a card and you want it to have a different modification on it, you can change, like, the extra effects that it'll do. And just the amount of creativity that it gives you access to is so fun. And of course, it's one of those the less you know the better games, where in terms of, like, the story, it was made by the same person who made Pony Island. It's got a lot, and that person's known for a lot of, like, fourth wall breaking, like, story elements. So I will say no more. The game is fun, the game is addicting, the game is really creative, and through each act, the game evolves in like a really unique way. Inscryption, if it was a game that was really made for me, it would be S tier. I think it's going to go at the top of A tier. Just from personal bias, you know? We got to put something down here. We gotta put something down here. We gotta reserve space for S tier for the truly, like, this game resonated with me. And again, this is a stacked list of games. So I gotta, like, make S tier mean something. Which means, like, we might move Guitar Hero. Lethal Company's gonna stay S tier. Maybe we'll move Guitar Hero. We'll think about it. Let's do another quote unquote bad game. I want to see if I can find my, like, I'm gonna lose my video essay credit here, but like I think it's worth having the conversation. So every now and then I'll play Mega Man and Mega Man X games. Mega Man, the original Mega Man games, I've already decided are just not made for me. I don't like where the challenge comes from, and I don't like the limited movement. Mega Man X has the benefit of having, like, really fun movement and just a little bit nicer presentation with, like, obviously the soundtrack of Mega Man X is, like, goated. And having the, like, PS1 or Super Nintendo sound chip, like, there's some bangers on the Super Nintendo electric guitar. So I've already decided years ago that I'm not a big fan of the original Mega Man series. I never played Mega Man X growing up, so every year I'll play a couple of the games. I played Mega Man X and I loved it. A little bit difficult, but like a really solid game. I played X2. X2 was good. I played X3. That one was I think people kind of agree that it's not as good as the first two Mega Man games. Oh, I think I found it. I posted in Discord a little while ago my thoughts that, like, the revelation that came to mind after beating Mega Man X5. I played Mega Man X4. I think that's my favorite of the series. And then I played 5. So my current ranking for Mega Man X games is X4, X2, X1, X3, and X5. Basically, what I said was, and this is full of emotion, alright? Do people really play these games for fun? Every time I pick up an OG or X Mega Man game, I get so frustrated with the level design and difficulty. It's too hard, like not even satisfying to finish. I just played X5 and it had some of the worst level design out of any of them, followed by the difficulty spike of the last 3 levels, taking me a whole day to beat. I think X5 did have some of the worst level design. The thing is, like, the concept of Mega Man is so fun, but and this goes for X and the original series. There's like 10% of the level design that you can tell they designed to have, like, trial and error in mind, where you aren't able to do it the first try. Like lava in Mega Man X5, or like spike pits in the original Mega Man. It's like, and the disappearing blocks in the original Mega Man games. Like, they're very intentionally designed where you're gonna die there, and then you're gonna have to play the entire level over again. And I feel like the last Wily stages tend to, like, take that to the extreme. And so, like, I find myself wanting to like Mega Man games, but just dying at the parts where I can tell the level designer wanted you to die here. And it just, like, takes me out of the whole experience. So, going on, I don't have much else to say for OG Mega Man, just not a fan. But after playing X through X5, there's some clear highs and lows, but they all focus on including cheap or unintuitive level design, so you need to replay the levels over and over to get past it. That matched with the really weird difficulty spikes just makes the games frustrating. I want to like them, I like the aesthetic, I want to see a focus on making games rewarding to beat rather than an unfair challenge to overcome. They're so close to being fun for me, but the 10 to 20% of the games ruin it every time. So, like, that's generally, like, I want to like these games so much, but they're not satisfying to beat. What's up, Under the Sun? Happy New Year. It's been a minute. I know I got a bunch of Mega Man fans in here, so like I think it's definitely worth the conversation because I didn't grow up playing Mega Man. There's gonna be some disconnect in terms of like I'm not as invested in the series as somebody who might be. The difficulty leads to some of the most rewarding experiences in gaming. The disappearing blocks is kind of indefensible, to be fair. So take the stuff like disappearing blocks. Add really weird strict platforming with spike pits at the bottom. Add really weird sections, like I think it's Mega Man X5 that has the auto scrolling sections. Mega Man 5 also has the lava level, which like you're immune to lava when you're in the piloting robot, but then you have to like jump and then jump. You have to jump in the mech out of the lava, then jump out of the mech to safety, or else if you time it wrong, you die instantly. Other things like I can't really point out unless I'm playing through the game actively, but I know like the Wily stages have a lot of really like, there's one specific way to get past this part, and if you mess up, you just die and have to start the level over again. It's just not for me. I think that same Discord post said I might give Mega Man 6, 7, and 8 a try one day, just to like say I played through the rest of the series. But I think going forward, the only ones I'll be excited about is Mega Man X Command Mission, which I'm hoping to make a video on one day, and the Star Force series, because I got nostalgia for Star Force. The other thing I have to keep in mind is Mega Man is a platforming action game, but it's designed for you to complete it because the difficulty as far as like enemy, not level design difficulty that I was just talking about, but the enemy difficulty and the boss difficulty is so stacked against you that you're meant to go find all the armor pieces, find all the health pieces. Like, it's weird that the game is a action platformer, but is kind of requiring you to explore the levels and find all the secrets, which is just not something that like I'm used to. Like if you play a Mario game, you're not expected to find all the secret exits and find all the secret worlds because they don't do anything for you except like give you more levels to play. Mega Man, you're expected to find all of the secrets so that you can get upgrades to be at like a proper power level to beat the games. Part of the fun for me was figuring out the parts that were harder. Like as a kid, it was basically an impossible game, but once I figured it out, it felt like I slayed a monster. Yeah, and it has that old school difficulty appeal. Like that was just part of things back in the day, was including those kind of difficulty challenges to lengthen the time spent playing the game. The difficulty definitely can be a bit much sometimes, but I think part of it is that I played X on the 3DS for my first run. I didn't know the original was on 3DS. I guess, yeah, Virtual Console was on 3DS. I only played Mega Man as an adult. Still need to play the latter X games. Mega Man 1 does suck, though, I will admit. Yeah, I played... I don't think I've ever beaten any of the original games, but I've played all of the original Mega Man games in some capacity. Playing it portably encouraged a more pick-up-and-play approach where I kind of accepted that I was making runs or attempts versus just sitting down and trying to grind it out. Yeah, Mega Man X games incentivize you to explore and find collectibles. So that being said, just to give myself some credit, if Mega Man X4 was on this list, it would probably be like B tier or low A tier. I think Mega Man X5 and X3 are the bottom of the Mega Man spectrum that I've played. So like I'm gonna put it D, maybe E, because like I think D is fair. I think E is too mean because again, my complaint with the series in general is that 10 to 20% that like makes the rest of the game not fun. If those parts weren't as impactful to my experience, then I would have had like a higher rating of like recommending it to somebody. But this year's tier list is about me recommending games to people. one, I wouldn't recommend Mega Man X5. I would recommend Mega Man X4 or 1 or 2. But the second thing is, like, this is the bottom of my experience with Mega Man. So, like, it would be D. So I know some of the games, 6, 7, or 8, some of them are, like, jokes on how, like, bad and different they are. So I'm excited to get to that. I also love getting better at movement in the X series, super satisfying like Melee. Yeah, for sure. That's a thing, that's a surface level thing that I can point to between the original series and Mega Man X to be like, yeah, I don't like the original series, but like I'll play X. Fear and Hunger. So Jack is in chat. Jack and I will recommend each other games to play that we have to play before we move on to the next game. And over the summer, I think it was in May, he had me play Fear and Hunger. And I'm glad he did. So like we'll put both of Jack's. We're gonna put Jack on blast, okay? He had me play Fear and Hunger and he had me play the Swapper this year. We played Year Walk together, we played Squirrel Stapler together, but we played Our Lung together. But the main games that were recommended to me were Fear and Hunger and the Swapper. I'm thankful for this kind of like game exchange because it's stuff that I wouldn't pick up otherwise or wouldn't prioritize otherwise. And Fear of Hunger was always something that I wanted to play, but knowing that this is an RPG that hates you, that mechanically is meant to put you down and is meant to really like fight you. You're not meant to beat Fear and Hunger. And so you're supposed to take it with a certain mindset. And playing through Fear and Hunger was really interesting. It's because the game is so difficult and because it's in the framework of an RPG Maker game, it has this really unique appeal of it ends up being like a sim game rather than an RPG where everything has an answer. You just have to trial and answer to find that answer. A really early example is fighting enemies. There's these big golems in the first area, and I forget exactly what it is. If you try to go for their head, you'll one-shot them, but the hit rate of their head is impossible. You're supposed to, I think, take out their arms first so they can't attack you, then take out their legs so that you can reach the head, and then kill the head. It's stuff like that where tactically engaging with enemies and using items, like you could also use, I don't know if it's a healing potion or like an oil vial or something. You can also throw your inventory at enemies and it'll like stun them, giving you an easy kill. You can interact with the environment, so the whole sim aspect is you could find a bear trap, you can set the bear trap, and you can have that golem walk into it, and then you can easily, you don't need to get rid of the arms first because you can reach the head, just get them to the bear trap, start the combat encounter, hit the head, gone. So the whole, and I guess that's not even the main appeal of the game. The main appeal is the eldritch horrors beyond your comprehension. The game has like a very sadistic, very dark atmosphere, very oppressive atmosphere, and it tells that atmosphere in its lore, in its gameplay. Fear and Hunger is one of a kind. Definitely, like there's a sequel that I'd love to play at one time, but I know it's a little bit of a departure from the first game. Maybe Jack can attest to that. Overall, I had a blast with it. It's definitely a game you need to enter with a certain kind of mindset. I think I would rank it in B tier somewhere. I think it's gonna go right here in the hopes that there will be some stuff. It looks bad putting it at the bottom of B tier, but it was a very fun, very memorable experience. Man, is it a difficult game. No worries, I'm just happy to see a familiar face in chat. The Swapper, that released in like 2012, didn't it? That's a much older game. I was very surprised you recommended me the Swapper. Because I remember it coming out, but I was never like 2014. But I like wasn't in the space to try something like that. Like that was around the time that indie games really started getting popular. My like landmark for that kind of thing is Shovel Knight's release, is when indie games really started getting some like notoriety. So Shovel Knight came out in 2014, the Swapper came out in 2014. It is a very interesting puzzle game. Maybe you can explain it better, but the whole idea is you have this tool that spawns like a second self of you, and then you can move your consciousness between the selves to solve puzzles. And it takes that concept, puts it on a spooky abandoned spaceship with a like alien being on board, and kind of explores that sense of like that sense of self and soul, being able to like use this tool to move yourself around. And the endings are really interesting too, playing on that whole concept. Fear and Hunger 2 has a more interconnected story with even more moving parts. The lore is incredibly interesting, and there's some really neat changes to character progression. Maybe if you recommend me Fear and Hunger 2, maybe if that's our game swap, then I'll play it, but otherwise I'll keep an eye out. But the Swapper was a solid experience. I think I would also put that in B tier. I don't think it... So, C tier is reserved for the truly neutral. I think Fear and Hunger and Swapper definitely do something to stand out from truly neutral, which is why they're like at the end of B tier here. Do I have anything? Let me try to pick out something that's truly neutral. This is the... So I played Resident Evil Village in 2023. I played the Shadows of Rose DLC in 2024, so that's what this one represents. Truly neutral. I don't think I have anything on here that I would recommend as truly neutral. Maybe click holding? Click holding is funny. It's kind of like a gimmick experience where the whole thing is you're trapped in a room with this like weird person. Oh, hold on, let's back up the Swapper. Make clones, body hop, solve puzzles, have an existential crisis. Yes. I think I did a close enough explanation then. I'm trying to like that's really what stands out. It's solid. It's not like, it's not this grand sweeping thing. It's just this cool, neat indie game with a cool, neat story. But click holding. Trapped in a hotel room, clicking for this weird person who's gonna pay you money to click in front of him because he likes you clicking. It's just very like satirical, funny, 1 hour long experience about clicking a button. It's like Cookie Clicker for like the freaks. That's the elevator pitch. Is how do we make Cookie Clicker for freaks? It was a fun time. I definitely recommend it. As far as like substance goes, like it's charming, it's funny, but like it's just like a you came, you saw, like that's all there is to it kind of thing. It's charming. Truly neutral in terms of me recommending it to somebody to play. I think, you know what? I'll have to think. I think Nexomon might be the next closest to a truly neutral pick. Nexomon 1 would be neutral, and Nexomon 2 would go in B tier, I think. Let's start with this. So, Nexomon's cool. The reason I got into the Nexomon series this year was they teased Nexomon 3, which... I saw teasers for Nexomon 3, which seemed to be like a really serious chance at coming for Pokemon. So I was like, in preparation for Nexomon 3, let me see what Nexomon and Nexomon Extinction are about. Both of them are available on iOS and consoles and PC, I think. So I played the iOS versions. It's like a very easy way for me to kind of dive into a series that I just want to check out on the side. And Nexomon 1, I thought was very bare bones and very basic. But after I beat the game, I learned that it was a really small team that worked on it. I want to say between like 5 and 20 people worked on the entire Nexomon game. And then my kind of opinion of it switched around to like, this is really impressive for a first time, for like a team that is, for like a small team that made maybe their first game. Let's do a little bit of exploration. Nexomon developers. I want to see how many games they put out. So it looks like Nexomon and Nexomon Extinction are the only 2 games they've made, and Nexomon is their first game. And when you go to the credits of Nexomon, it was a very short list of developers. So my kind of impression of the game really changed for the positive of like, this is a really neat product for what it's attempting to do. It's attempting to be Pokemon, but indie. And I think the first Nexomon was an impressive kind of showcase of what they're capable of. But as soon as you start Nexomon Extinction, you immediately notice just how much better the studio's gotten at making a game. So Nexomon was pretty like average, pretty like it was just neutral. Nexomon Extinction I think is a really big step up. I think it's a big enough step where I would put it at B tier. And it has me really excited to see what Nexomon 3 turns out to be, because if you look at the trailers for that, that's in 3D. That's a fully 3D, maybe open world experience, kind of emulating what Pokemon Legends Arceus or Pokemon Scarlet and Violet's doing. But like, going from Nexomon to Nexomon Extinction to looking at the Nexomon 3 trailer, I'm really excited to see what they eventually put out. Yearwalk is a very interesting narrative game, all about solving puzzles. It's actually made by the same people who did Sayonara Wild Hearts, which I didn't know. This was another recommendation from Jack that we played together. The atmosphere is really cool, and the way that Jack explained it to me, the original release, and correct me if I'm wrong, was a mobile release, and it had a companion app that cataloged all of the like folklore monsters that are referenced in the game. And what they wanted you to do was go back and forth between the like encyclopedia app and the main game itself to solve puzzles. And I think it was this really neat narrative story taking advantage of the like just the folklore monsters, the like little bit of horror sprinkled in, and the like the snowy landscape, the like otherworldly feeling snowy landscape was like such a unique experience for me. It's a short game. I would say the whole thing's about 3 to 4 hours, depending on like how long it takes for you to do puzzles, but it was like absolutely like a mobile split between 2 apps. So Annapurna is the publisher, I believe. The developer is Simogo. So let's fact check a little bit here. If I go to developer Simogo, yeah, Yearwalk was 2013. Sayonara Wild Hearts is 2019. And I Need to Play Lorelei and the Laser Eyes is 2024, among other games, but same developers. Yeah, the atmosphere in Yearwalk is phenomenal. Iron Lung is a game that I didn't know what to expect when we started playing it. It's a game that while I was playing it, I was just kind of like confused. But after playing it and like mulling over the kind of experience that you're in for, my opinion really changed. I think if you're expecting to play like... If you're expecting to play like just an average indie horror game, you're gonna be disappointed. But if you come in and you're gonna like put yourself in the shoes of somebody who's in like a death trap one-way submarine to explore eldritch horrors at the bottom of the like blood sea, and the game is about maneuvering that ship and just kind of like putting yourself in the shoes of that person, like inconveniences and all, because the main thing that you're going to be doing is steering a ship blind at the bottom of the sea, and every now and then you're going to look out the like picture window, take pictures and like look at stuff. And so it's not necessarily fun, but it's very interesting in terms of like, I don't want to repeat myself, but like it does a really good job kind of immersion. That's the word. It does a really good job immersing you in that role. And so if you go into the game knowing that, like I definitely think Iron Lung would be probably here. Somewhere in B tier. Squirrel Stapler's easy. That's a fun indie horror game. That's the exact opposite of what I was explaining with Iron Lung. Jack, were these two made by the same people? Squirrel Stapler and Iron Lung? Or did you get that from another source? Squirrel Stapler's funny. You're in the woods with your unalived wife. Going hunting for squirrels and stapling them to your wife. Let me look up the I didn't do it enough justice. What is the game's definition? Hunt squirrels, staple them to a corpse, and meet God. It's very funny. And it's very like, it's scary, kind of. It's funny. It's really funny. It's a short, like 1 to 2 hour long game where you're like going in the woods, hunting squirrels, and like funny, scary stuff happens. I really enjoyed Squirrel Stapler. I think it'll go right there in B tier. Same creator. Man, I played a lot of games this year. We're not even like halfway done. Everhood. Everhood is a really cool game. It has this really cool narrative about... It's about like immortality and like the fear of moving on. So it's like, it's about life, it's about death, it's about immortality. Every character in the game has immortality, and they're kind of like, they're all kind of stuck. And it's this really impactful narrative because you're the one that is interacting with these characters and kind of moving them forward in life when they're all kind of like stuck and lost. And the gameplay is really cool. It's I guess you would call it a bullet hell, where it's like a bullet hell themed like a rhythm game where every character has a song, and that song sends obstacles your way and you're supposed to navigate around them. And I think I've had a conversation with a bunch of people before about, I play a lot of arcade rhythm games, and some of them prioritize flashiness over readability way too often. And Everhood does the same thing, but it's the reason it does it is so good that like I understand why it's done that way, and like it ends up being a positive. it takes the readability and obfuscates it around like I feel like I'm talking at like a scholar level. Like I don't need to be this like big brain about it. It'll like let me give you an example. There is an enemy in the forest that's a mushroom that when you fight it, you end up tripping out on shrooms. And because of that, like the screen will go all wavy or the screen will go upside down or there'll be these like really psychedelic patterns that pop up on screen. All of it makes the game harder to read, but it's done contextually in such a fun way that like, oh yeah, of course, like I'm tripping on shrooms, like it's going to be harder to like to like complete this level. It does stuff like that in a really clever way, and the story is good, the presentation is good, the music is phenomenal. I don't know, it's just a good time. The message is really like impactful too. Everhood, I think we'll go pretty high on B tier. Let's pause. Let's look at our current tier list. And let's move some stuff around. Lethal Company, definitely an S tier. Guitar Hero 2 and 3, I think should still be S tier. Inscription, Every Extend Extra, Buckshot, and the original Guitar Hero. I think that's good at A tier. Honestly, Everhood, Humanity, Res, Child, Castlevania games, Fear and Hunger. I like my list so far. I think my list is accurate so far. I don't think I would move anything. Let's pick and choose. Let's do something. Let's add another S tier. Indica is the most underrated game of 2024. I originally found out about it because of Game Thoughts Duncan's video on Indica. And I was like, wow, this game sounds like it's just for me. I ended up playing it, and I'm actually going to release a video on Indica next week. That is, spoiler, the next YouTube video I'm going to put out. Indica, for me, would have been Game of the Year if not for another game on this list. So, Indica is the second best game that I played of 2024. It had such an impressive narrative on a topic that you don't really see a lot in video games. It's about religion, but it's not this like edgy, is religion good or bad, yes or no. It's more of like a personal story about the character Indica dealing with trauma with and without religion. And it tells such a cool narrative that I really haven't seen before. And it was nominated for, I think, Games for Impact for Game of the Year for the Game Awards. And it sucks that I didn't get it. It's essentially a narrative game with light puzzles, with light environmental puzzles. It's mostly just roadblocks in order to get you to look around and explore the world it is. So, primarily a narrative filled with a little bit of puzzle, light environmental puzzles. Very good. Very best game I've ever played so far on the tier list. So, wait a week. January 8th. Next week on Wednesday is when I plan to upload the Indica video. Very excited about it. I played a couple games. I had gotten a new TV and gotten Game Pass, and I was able to prioritize a couple games that hadn't been put on a physical disc yet, because a lot of times I'll wait to play a game until it gets a physical release. Senua Saga, Jusant, and Solar Ash were 3 indie games that I really wanted to play, and so I was able to play those 3 during Game Pass. I think that was it. for that. So we can talk about those 3 games. Yeah, the funny thing is I would have never heard of Indica without your video. So like, I mean, that's part of why I do what I do is, one, I started making YouTube videos because I wanted to put myself out there, be a little bit more social. But I also have a lot of respect for other people who are doing video game essays and just sharing new cool game experiences that otherwise would kind of like fall under the radar. Because I had never heard of Indica until your video, and then a couple other people were the name kept popping up, and I saw it was a short game, so I was like, I want to play it without really looking into it, and it ended up being one of my favorite games of 2024. So like heartfelt thank you, Game Thoughts, for making a video like that. Solar Ash was cool. It was like a combination of like parkour movement with Shadow of the Colossus. I need to play more of this developer's games because Charlie's been wanting me to play what's it called? Hyper Light Drifter. So I haven't played Hyper Light Drifter yet. I played Solar Ash now that that was on Game Pass. Hyper Light Breaker is supposed to release sometime this year. I think early access before the full release. But maybe I'll get to Hyper Light Drifter soon. I've heard it's really good. Maybe I should bump it up the list. But Solar Ash was a really good time. There's not too much to say about it. It feels like so some of my favorite... Let me back up again. I don't like a lot of open world games, but I found a lot of indie games have been like fulfilling that need in a really like digestible way. So Solar Ash is a really good example, and The Pathless is a really good example. The Pathless is now one of my favorite indie games, just period. But both games will take the open world aesthetic and give you small open worlds. So like every level is a small contained open world. And then when you beat that level, you go over here and you do this small open world. Then you go over here and do this small open world. And so Solar Ash puts you... Every level is a different open space that you're meant to explore. And it kind of makes the open world thing more digestible because you get new scenery, you get new places to explore. And so long as you're not trying to complete the game, each new area has its own set of like stuff that you're looking for. So it's not like a Ubisoft giant open world with a bunch of checkboxes where you're doing the same exact thing. It's like you're in this area to do this level, you beat the boss, move on to the next, do what you're supposed to do, move on. So I think Solar Ash is a really good example of like how to do an open world, in my opinion, of like what I want out of it. I think Solar Ash is above C tier. I think it's going to be another B tier rep. But it's going to be a high B tier rep because it was really chill. I think like the main divide here is the Castlevania games. Everything's going to be like better than the Castlevania Game Boy Advance games. Sorry, a higher recommendation of the Castlevania games or a lower recommendation. I think it would go above. No, I think it would also go above. These are the two splits. The Tetsuya Mizuguchi games and the Castlevania games. I think it does go here. Jusant is another game that was recommended to me by Game Thoughts. Shouts out. Jusant was phenomenal. Honestly, like, it's gonna be A or S tier. I think it's gonna be high A tier. It's this cool game about climbing, and it has a narrative centered in such a unique world. The world that's like affected by drought. And so you're climbing this huge tower, and the people live on the tower. And so it has this really beautiful world that I've never seen before. Its story is told by notes left behind, which is like not a new thing, but you kind of like learn about the people that lived on this giant stone tower because of like the the stores and shops that were left behind, or the like adventurers that are like, because of this drought, they're climbing to the top to get answers. And I don't want to spoil it too much, but it just has this amazing vibe that's just so relaxing to play. I think I beat it in 2 days because I was just so relaxed playing through it. I think it's a high A tier. It might be S tier. I gotta think about it. It's got this like Disney charm with its unique art style and its little like companion bug guy that has that's like on the shoulder of the main character. Senua Saga Hellblade 2 is a little bit of a conversation. It's interesting because it's very different from the first game. The first game focused a lot on Senua's psychosis and kind of like had a realistic depiction because they did their research looking at symptoms of psychosis. And it translated it to a video game in such a unique way that didn't really serve as like, hey, there's something wrong with this character. Rather, it kind of said like, hey, this is the way you are. It comes with positives and it comes with negatives, but there's things that only you can do. And it turned Senua into such a really like strong female character that I really appreciated. Hellblade 2, well, and lastly with Hellblade 1, another thing is it was a very graphically like graphically strong, I'm at a loss for words again. Maybe I need more coffee. It was like a graphical powerhouse. Like, it was a very gorgeous looking game for its time. It made the most of the hardware that it was on. And Hellblade 2 did the same exact thing. The thing is, Hellblade 2 focused less on Senua as a character. And none of this is a negative. It wasn't what I was expecting the story to be, and so I ran with it. Hellblade 2 was less about Senua's internal struggle and more about Indica finding a merry band of compatriots to like solve each tribe's problems and then move on to the next to do the same thing. And then the other selling point, of course, is that this game is one of the best looking games of its time. And not only is it using the graphics to its fullest capacity, but it's also investing a lot of development into making the combat look really impressive, like straight out of a movie. If you look at scenes of Hellblade, it feels like you're watching a movie. And that's for better or worse, because the combat of Hellblade 1 was like really solid. Hellblade 2, they kind of took away some of the player control in order to direct scenes in a way that would make it look like a movie. And so like it kind of sucked that the combat took a downturn. And you know, once you see a certain amount of character animations of them like jumping into frame and jumping out to frame, once you see them repeated so much, the charm just kind of like loses its luster. But the quality of the game just like didn't drop at all. The combat was different from the first game, and the focus of the story was different from the first game, but it was still like a phenomenal experience. I think I want to put it at low A tier because it's absolutely like, it's absolutely a modern accomplishment. But its charm, it's not as, its identity isn't as strong as the first game. I definitely like the first game more. And I think they're both A-tier experiences. I forget what I ranked the first Hellblade when I played it. I might have gave it an S rank. But they're both like at least A-tier experiences. It's just Hellblade 2, I think didn't have as strong as an identity. It wasn't a worse game because of that, but definitely worth the conversation. All right, let's do some easy ones. This list isn't getting shorter. I think Sonic Colors was interesting. So this was a revisit for me. I played Sonic Colors years ago. I want to say maybe like 10 years ago. And I liked it. So maybe maybe this isn't an easy one. It's an easy one where I'm going to end up ranking it. It's like low D for me. When I first played Sonic Colors, I'm like, oh, like Sonic's back. I had played the Wii Sonic games. I played Secret Rings. I played Sonic and the Black Knight, and I played Sonic Unleashed on the 360. And obviously, the first two like aren't really good examples of good Sonic games. Sonic and the Black Knight was substantially better than Secret Rings, but like still just kind of okay. And Sonic Unleashed was like the daytime stages were great, but then you play like a 5-minute Sonic daytime level and then play 30 minutes of Walmart God of War. And so being able to have more of the daytime stages, and Sonic Colors was also like a soft reboot for the Sonic series. Unleashed is a good game. I still don't hide it. I still don't hold it in the same high regard as like, maybe this is like an obvious statement. I don't put it in as high regard as like Adventure or Adventure 2. I still think Unleashed is like 2 tiers below those games, which sucks. But I played Sonic Colors and I like what they were thinking, like a soft reboot for Sonic. It's only got Sonic and Tails. It's focusing on the daytime gameplay that worked in Unleashed, and it's like tightening that to like a more, because if you go back and play Unleashed, and like maybe I don't have the it's not in my head to where I can say this with confidence, but I feel like the daytime stages were fun, but they weren't as tightly designed as like Sonic Generations. Sonic Colors tightened it up a little bit, but it also had a lot of 2D sections in the 3D in the 3D levels. The story of Sonic Colors is so bad, man. Like the levels, the actual like level theme of Sonic going to an interstellar amusement park and like playing levels in the amusement park, getting like an underwater Japanese theme, Planet Wisp theme. I forget what some of the other ones are, but Sonic Colors had some of the most inspired level themings that I've ever seen. And I love, like, it's like a Mario Sunshine thing, right? Like, Mario Sunshine is so cool because all of its levels are tropical themed, but they're all so vastly different, but still thematically consistent. Like, you can even see the levels of Mario Sunshine in different areas. Like, you can see them in the horizon. And it gives it that, like, cohesive, like, feeling that just makes Sunshine so like such a fun game to play. So Sonic Colors kind of does the same thing with its like interstellar amusement park aesthetic, but the actual story is so unforgettable, and like they just chopped any kind of personality from Sonic and Eggman. I've thought about, like, I think about Sonic a lot, you know, like end of sentence. Like I just think about him a lot, you know. And I think the best parts of Sonic, the parts that make Sonic, that give Sonic its strongest identity, were the edgy storylines. Sonic Adventure, Sonic Adventure 2, even Sonic 06, and like kind of Sonic Unleashed, but I think Sonic 06, like Shadow the Hedgehog. I think Sonic Unleashed was the last story where they tried something really like edgy. And I think that one of the most defining character traits of Sonic games are Sonic Adventure, Adventure 2, 06, and Shadow the Hedgehog's like edgy stories. And so when you take that away from Sonic, all that's left is like Sonic, Eggman. All of the bosses in Sonic Colors are just like Eggman robots that don't talk. So every cutscene in Sonic Generations just becomes Sonic yelling one-liners at inanimate objects. and like Eggman wants to take over the world, but he's got these like funny robots that make jokes about themselves and fall over each other, and one of them's sound chip is broken, so he talks like a cowboy, and it's like what are we doing here? Like, who's this made for? But like upon revisit, I just kind of like didn't realize how unfun Sonic Colors actually is to play. And it just left a bad taste in my mouth. So D tier it goes. I would not... There's a lot of Sonic games I would recommend before recommending Colors to somebody. I thought that was going to be an easy one. Mario RPG will probably be an easy one. Let's do the stuff that I made videos on, because then that speaks for itself. And instead of rehashing, I can say, go watch my video. I think Super Mario RPG is such an easy recommendation. It's like gamers' first RPG in like the most positive light, because it's like funny, it's charming, it's simple, and it's short. I think it does its job really well, and it also is very novel because it's taking these Mario characters and like actually giving them a personality and giving them a world to explore that's still the Mushroom Kingdom, but like something you wouldn't see in a platformer. I think Mario RPG definitely clears into an easy A. There's not much to talk about, but I also did a video on it where there is stuff to talk about, so definitely check that out. Pseudo Regalia is going to be another S tier. I think that goes all the way in S tier, above Lethal, below Indica. And the reason I say that is, one, I did a video on it. Two, it has some of the most interesting platforming mechanics. I think the platforming mechanics in Pseudo Regalia are as good as something like Super Mario 64, where you have your base moveset that has its intended purpose, but the levels and the level design will let you use every move that you have at your disposal to its fullest, so that when you replay the game and you're already familiar with your moveset, you're just doing like insane stuff. And the other thing too is this game is structured like a Metroidvania, so you're unlocking moves and unlocking keys and stuff based on how much you can like just break the game by going wherever you want with the kit that you currently have. And I think it's such a cool combination. On top of its already like amazing soundtrack and amazing dreamlike aesthetic, and it was made by one person. It's so kind of one of a kind to see a game like this where its platforming is just it's got the same like speedrunning Mario 64 and speedrunning Pseudo Regalia like has to be kind of like neck and neck for how in-depth the movement mechanics can be exploited. You should check out Pilfer Story of Light. I've never heard of that one. Mario Odyssey inspired indie platformer. Let's check it out. I played a couple, last year I played, what was it called? This looks cute. I definitely see the Mario Odyssey and Mario Galaxy influence. And it's out now, or it's... Yeah, it came out 2023. Lunistis. I played Lunistis, and that was a really fun... It wasn't... It was more like Galaxy 2, where it's just level after level, but it was really fun. Signalis is an amalgamation of every good decision made in a PlayStation 2 era survival horror game, like combined into one game. Signalis is such a cool experience, such a like a balanced horror experience, such a interesting narrative that has so many layers to it but still leaves stuff obscure. I made a video on it, definitely worth checking out. if you want peak survival horror, I think you gotta play Signalis. I think the hardest one that's going to be to talk about is going to be Wanted Dead. Wanted Dead was such a cool, like, B tier, C tier, whatever you call it, character hack and slash, but it kind of kneecapped itself in the beginning. It's very ambitious. Like, it's the kind of game where you can see where it's struggling. I think the biggest thing for me is Wanted Dead tried to be a third-person shooter and a, like, melee focused hack and slash, but it had a skill tree, and it had a skill tree and it had very limited ammo. So the very early levels of the game just feel really bad to play. And those early levels are going to be the most impactful for players that like might bounce off of it, which is like a really sad thing to see. So like you didn't have enough ammo to purely play a third-person shooter, but you didn't have the tools to make use of your melee combat. And so the game was really challenging in its first few levels. And it's intended to be challenging, but it doesn't feel good. The game doesn't feel good until after you start earning all your skill tree stuff. But once you do, the game is like so much better on a replay. The game was very charming. The story could have used some work. I wanted to make a video on Wanted Dead, but like I feel like it's a game that I need to play at least twice in order to get like a solid grasp on what I want to talk about. But in short, it's like, it's very promising. You have to stick with it. You have to acknowledge that this is a very challenging game. It's designed to be challenging. But once you start like grinding or unlocking skills and like extra stuff, then like your work pays off and it becomes like a really rewarding action game that's like, it's really satisfying to do melee combat, but then you remember like, oh, the game also gives you guns. So that kind of like momentum shift between melee and third-person shooting, back to melee, back to third-person shooting, because you can't rely on shooting because you don't have a lot of ammo. So going back and forth between the two is like really, really fun. Knowing that the intro is gonna bounce some people off of it, it has to go to B tier, but I want it to be like a high B tier because it's something that really resonated with me. Like, it has very clear flaws. I never played, what's it called? What's the other game called? Stellar Blade. I didn't play Stellar Blade, but I think it fits that same, like, this is a very ambitious game made by people who really wanted to make something cool. But we're like, but sadly, like, the final product has some very clear shortcomings that, like, would love to see fixed in some kind of, like, sequel or, like, definitive version. So, like, Wanted Dead was really cool. Definitely worth checking out. We'll do an easy one because this song is playing from Metaphor right now. Metaphor ReFantazio, I have been waiting for since that first like teaser that the people who made Persona 3, 4, and 5 were working on a fantasy game. I think that initial teaser was sometime in like 2017 or something. It was called Project ReFantasy. And it's such a cool thing. Like, in my long career of playing video games, a lot of things I look forward to now is not a sequel, not another sequel to a game I've already played, but seeing names that I recognize that made the games that I love come together and be like, hey, we've been making video games for like 20, 30 years. We've never made a fantasy game. Like, let's make a fantasy game. So the director of Persona 3 through 5, the character designer, the composer, among other people, got together and made a fantasy game for the first time. And Metaphor, I think, really resonated with me. It's that like right time and place sort of thing. The story was really relevant for me personally. Just being about democracy, being about like class struggle, being about just the characters, the journey, the environment, like the adventure that you go on. The villain is the character and the villain are some of the characters that like of your party members, and the villains are some of the best written characters I've seen in like video games. The villain of Metaphor is easily like Kefka tier memorable. And just like the game opening up, so like the protagonist has a storybook that he reads, and it's a utopia, and the catch is the utopia is essentially them describing real life, granted like a very rose-tinted version of real life, but like every time the protagonist opens up his book and reads like utopia, and me being like the video game player playing the game being like this is real life, kind of like filled me with hope. A lot of Persona games can be boiled down into like one word messages. Persona 3 is about death, Persona 4 is about truth, Persona 5 is about rebellion. Metaphor I think is about hope. And I think it just, again, came out at that perfect time where it really resonated with me. It's definitely the best game I played this year. It's a shame that, like... Well, it's also an Atlas RPG. It's got turn-based combat. It's got press turn combat from, like, SMT3. And, like, not only are you telling me a story that is gonna, like, impact me for years and years and years, but it's also got turn-based RPG combat that I love. So, like, it's a shame Indica didn't have turn-based combat, and that's a joke, of course, but, like, Metaphor as a complete package, after I'm all over it, I think it might be one of my favorite games of all time. Like, maybe top 10. I gotta think about it, but it's absolutely S tier. It's absolutely worth playing. It's so fun to see the people who made Persona 3, 4, and 5, games that hold very special places in my heart, kind of knock it out of the park with a brand new IP. They've already done interviews where they talked about a possible sequel, and so I like Metaphor is something you shouldn't miss. Persona 3 Reload, funny enough, I ate good this year. Persona 3 and Silent Hill 2 are both top 5 games for me, and they both got remakes this year. Persona 3 was always a hard game to recommend because the story was something that was a right time and place, resonated with me. It's about death. It has some of the best written characters in fictional media that I've ever experienced. I have a tattoo of the school logo on my thigh because I like this game so much. But it was always hard to recommend because the PlayStation 2 game had very dated combat mechanics. It was difficult, but not for good reasons. And then there was the PSP remake that was... It had to take some presentation hits because it went from the console PS2 to the PSP. But it was missing the epilogue. So it was missing content, it took a dive in presentation, but they fixed the combat. So like no matter what version you played, they were always taking some kind of positive away from it. So when they announced Persona 3 Reload, like I was locked in. I wanted this to be the best version of Persona we could ever have, so that it was a no-brainer that I could recommend this game to you. And Persona 3 Reload did deliver. It polished up every flaw, both mechanically and visually, of the original Persona, and polished it up to a modern standard. They added new content, which I think fleshed out some of the parts of the story that needed it. The main things were the team that you're a part of, SEES, existed before you joined it. So they had a lot of conversations and scenes kind of reminiscing about how SEES was before you joined. There was lots of smaller moments that were really necessary, like there were optional study groups that you could do before tests with your group, and they would kind of have the space to talk about what they just did in terms of what was going on with the story. The main enemy group, Strega, got a lot more fleshed out, and one of the later introduced characters got like social link kind of additional moments. All of the main male protagonist characters didn't have social links because it was just kind of like a limit of the PlayStation 2's focus. So they didn't give them social links, but they gave them optional conversations that you could have, like pseudo social links, and that fleshed them out a little bit. They ended up doing the Epilogue DLC, which I think the Epilogue DLC is just as important. The Epilogue DLC was really unique because I've never seen, again, these characters are so well written that the Persona, the Answer DLC kind of showed characters exhausted and like having to do this thing again that they thought they were done with. And the way that they're written in that Epilogue DLC is just so like heavy and emotionally drained and exhausted. And so it does, the DLC is really grindy. That's always been a flaw of the original, and it sticks to the remake. But the importance of just giving characters something to do past the main story that lets them kind of vent and decompress was like really interesting for me. It was something I've never seen in games before. The only thing, sadly, they couldn't include in Reload was the female protagonist route. And, like, part of me understands it. They have to re-record lines, essentially do, like, a whole second story in this game. I'm happy that Persona 3 Reload exists as it does today. Maybe in the future they can add a female protagonist route. That way, no missing content. No content is missing from any version of Persona 3. But what we have here, I would recommend this because this is a remake of my favorite game of all time, and really I have no notes. Silent Hill 2 remake by Bloober Team is a really interesting product. I was very skeptical, and I want Bloober Team to do well. They have released games in the past. I did a video years ago on the Medium where Bloober Team's games just visually look fantastic. But the Medium in particular, I think, just to like go over it briefly, I think they were more interested in spinning off a sequel that they didn't really carry the sensitive subject matter of trauma in a very like productive manner, and it was a shame. And then there's like the meme videos floating around of like them kind of dropping the ball on Layers of Fear and just like not really doing a good job making a horror game, essentially. Like, I played Layers of Fear and I didn't like it. I didn't play the sequel, I didn't play any of their other games aside from the Medium. But there was, like, still stuff in the Medium that, like, was there to like. Come Silent Hill 2, one of the best games ever made. How does anybody, let alone Bloober Team, remake one of the best games ever made and do it right? I was cautiously optimistic. All they had to do was take Silent Hill and remake it visually, which they're good at because they have really gorgeous environments in their games. And like not change the story, not change the focus on like combat or anything else. Come release date, they actually did change a lot of stuff, but they didn't really mess up anything. The environments were gorgeous. The story and the little bits that they fleshed out were great. They kind of reimagined the town of Silent Hill as well as the existing puzzles in a more modern light. and they did a really good job. I think the only thing I might have a complaint for is like the way that the combat is. The enemies are so aggressive in the Silent Hill 2 remake that I'm checking corners like I'm playing Valorant rather than like just existing in the same space. Like the original Silent Hill 2 enemies were scary because you were in the same room with them, and like combat was so clunky that like just navigating around them and trying to fight them was scary. Now, remake, everything is way more fine-tuned, where combat feels very reactable and very like you can master this. But the thing is, they still do a lot of damage. So if you're engaging with combat, even if you take 1 or 2 hits, you're still using resources, which is a part of survival horror. So like it's fine. It serves a purpose. It's more streamlined, it's more modern. You can kind of master combat, but it's still engaging with survival horror resource management. Now, I hate the amount of enemies that jump scare you in around corners and in rooms, because like, again, I spend conscious brain power like going in a room and checking corners like I'm playing Counter-Strike or Valorant, that it kind of like takes the scare out of the encounters and makes it like boy, I hope there's not a mannequin around the corner that wants to kick my ass. But all things aside, like, this remake was phenomenal. It's gonna go in S tier. I think that the Silent Hill remake fulfills the same role as the Resident Evil remakes, where both the original experience and the remake experience are both valid ways to enjoy the game. What's up, Brian? Yeah, I name dropped Counter-Strike. Funny you were the one to answer the call. Silent Hill: A Short Message was interesting. There was a lot of cool visuals. It was kind of like a demo for what's to come with the future of Silent Hill. And I think for what it's worth, it was a fine experience. I think it goes probably at like the end of B tier. There's not really a lot to talk about. It follows a character dealing with like suicidal thoughts and trauma, and kind of characterizes it in the world of Silent Hill, where like the environment is a reflection of that. It was cool, it was neat. I don't have a lot to say about it. Between the Silent Hill 2 remake and Silent Hill: A Short Message, I really like the direction that like Silent Hill F is the next thing I'm really looking forward to. I think if Silent Hill F knocks it out of the park, it's gonna change what Silent Hill can be, considering that Silent Hill F takes place in like the past in Japan, when Silent Hill's primarily like it takes place like in some place in the US, and they're very like US centric. I think if Silent Hill F does well, like Silent Hill as an idea can be more broad and more interesting. So we'll have to see. Another thing is, now that Silent Hill 2 remake is great, I think we slipped into the good timeline where they're going to remake Silent Hill 3 and Silent Hill 1 and maybe Silent Hill 4. And I would like to see Bloober Team take on that, considering how good Silent Hill 2 remake is. Silent Hill won't truly be back until we get Book of Memories 2. Said no one ever. I would like a remake of Silent Hill: The Room. Honestly, I mean, if I were to get them in order, right? Do Silent Hill 1 remake, Silent Hill 3, and do 4. But like, I want you to do them all. I like 4 a lot, but it's got some clear problems that a remake can fix. So I'd be excited to see if what they would do if they would touch it. Dude, especially like adding the atmosphere that they have for Silent Hill 2, just putting that kind of atmosphere in the room that you spend most of your time in Silent Hill 4, just would be like really interesting to see. Okay. Let's power through this. I want to do Cyberpunk, because I forgot I played that this year. It feels like a lifetime ago. I don't like open world games very much, but there's times where I like get in the mood to try something new. And Cyberpunk, post patches, was just like, it really lived up to the hype. The amount of quality and effort put into all of the missions of that game, into the world of Night City. It's just a cool place to exist in. Like, I was even thinking of booting it back up and just kind of like being in the world, like playing it for an evening or something. It absolutely goes in S tier. I think it's worth the recommendation. I think it's something truly worthy of all the praise that it's gotten, because again, just the amount of production that goes into all of the missions of that game, all of the main missions and the DLC and all that stuff, it's just like really good. Unless Last of Us is another easy one. That's another S tier. So like, I didn't really like the first Last of Us game. I don't really think it like did a whole lot new with its story. I know Joel's not supposed to be a likable character, but I always defend that, like, me recognizing that, I still don't really like how they wrote him. Like, not talking about the ending or anything else. He's just like not an enjoyable character to interact with when he's like the main character of The Last of Us. So when The Last of Us Part 2 came around, I kind of already understood what was going to happen in the story through osmosis of like watching other reviews and stuff like that, and like the cultural reaction and all that stuff. I always wanted to play it. I just didn't make it a priority until this year. And I must say, I was blown away by The Last of Us Part 2. I wasn't sure how I was going to feel about it after not enjoying the first game. But The Last of Us Part 2 is like really just a perfect game. I played the Uncharted series. I never really played a lot of Naughty Dog stuff. So I played the first Last of Us. I didn't really like it. Last year I played, I think it was last year or the year before, I played Uncharted 1 through 4. And then this year I played The Last of Us Part 2. And like, I'm officially like a Naughty Dog fan. I'm excited to see that new game when that comes out. I don't know if that had a release date, but they announced a new game that they're making. Last of Us Part 2 is definitely S tier. I feel like I would put it at the top here. Pokemon Scarlet and Violet DLC. What is it actually called? The Teal Mask and the Teal Mask and Indigo Disc. So I played base Scarlet and Violet. I may have talked about it in last year's tier list. It's some of the most pure fun I've had playing a Pokemon game, but it's got some very clear flaws. One of them was the story. Everything up till the Area Zero was just so forgettable. Like all of the characters, all of the checklist stuff you were supposed to do about team... whatever the heck the team name was that I don't remember. What was the... Team Star. See, I don't even... like, I even remember Team Yell. I don't remember Team Star at all. Everything with Clive. Everything was just so forgettable up until that final chapter in Scarlet and Violet. Now, the DLC for Teal Mask and Indigo Disc. The peak story of Area Zero was the entirety of the DLC for Teal Mask and Indigo Disc. All of the characters were really fun and interesting. The open worlds were a lot smaller, so there was like a lot less fluff. And just the the DLC for Scarlet and Violet had no right to make the rival character one of the best rival characters in the Pokemon history. Like Kieran and Carmen, those two characters are just such fun characters. They all go through their own arc. Like they're not perfect. Like they all fuck up. I'll try not to like talk about spoilers or anything either, because I thought it was really good. It's just a shame you got to play through. I don't think you have to beat the entirety of the base game, but like naturally, I think a person would do that before moving on to the DLC. But like Kieran goes through a lot of different character arcs, and he's such an interesting character. He's sometimes an asshole, like, but it's also understandable because you like treated him shitty. Anyway, Pokemon DLC was really good. I want to put it at A tier. It was like, you'll put it here. It was some highlight for Pokemon storytelling for sure. All right, we're getting down to the wire. I guess we can talk about more Pokemon. I played the Pokemon Diamond and Pearl remakes. I played the originals. I never finished Platinum. Obviously, so my philosophy with Pokemon remakes is like, I'm assuming they're fulfilling two roles. Making sure that you can catch old Pokemon and move them to new games because, you know, it's old technology. You can't bring Pokemon from the original, like, Gold and Silver and move them up to modern games, but that's what Heart Gold and Soul Silver are for. Pokemon Diamond and Pearl, even before the remakes came out, you can still transfer your Pokemon up to the new games. They made a Pokemon Transporter and then Pokemon Home. So the remakes already aren't doing that. The second thing is taking the original games and reimagining them with modern hardware. The remakes didn't do that either. Instead, they chose to kind of they chose to copy the original's sprites, but just copy them into 3D. So the character models, the grid, the overworld, everything's exactly the same. So it's not this like really big reimagining of something new, which is really disappointing. I think the most disappointing thing is that it doesn't include Platinum's content, which if you're remaking a game, you want to include all of the content that was part of that generation as best you can. And like the Platinum storyline is just missing. All of that stuff sucks. At the end of the day, it's still Pokemon. It's still like a quality experience and it's worth recommending. I would probably put it somewhere in B tier. Because like Pokemon's always enjoyable. It's always good. All of my complaints are just like what could have been. I think I'll probably put it right there. Cosmic Wheel Sisterhood is an easy one. I played Red Strings Club in a previous year. Both Red Strings Club and Cosmic Wheel are narrative-driven games. Sisterhood was really interesting. It's a narrative game that... So, a lot of narrative games, you're kind of molding the story based on what dialogue you choose. The premise of Cosmic Wheel Sisterhood is that you play as a witch who reads tarot cards, and all of her predictions come true. So, instead of picking from dialogue box options, you're designing your tarot cards, which all hold different meanings, which you interpret a meaning to when you talk to different characters. And it's such a unique way to tell a story. On top of that, it has a very, if you like politics, it has a very like political story, and you end up like running to lead the witch coven and stuff like that. But it's very good. Definitely recommend. I think it would be A tier. I think it would probably be up. My A tier looks really weird. I stand by it, but we'll do the last few games and maybe we'll move some stuff around. Slay the Princess is neat. It's It's like the less you know, the better. It's a narrative where you're like a person wandering in the woods trying to find a princess, and your mission is to kill the princess. Whatever you do, your goal is to kill the princess, but she's going to negotiate with you, obviously, because she doesn't want to die. And depending on what dialogue choices you pick, different things happen in the story, and you want to replay it again and again and again to see the different endings as they like converge into a final ending. There is a new Final Cut version that I haven't played yet, but Slay the Princess was a solid experience. It was good. I think it's B tier. It will go right here. Spark the Electric Jester. If my friends are still in chat, they know I've yelled at them to play Spark the Electric Jester because they're all Sonic fans, and Spark the Electric Jester 3 is the best 3D Sonic game I've ever played. It goes in S tier. Where in S tier? Probably. I've never had so much raw enjoyment playing like an indie Sonic game or playing a Sonic game than I have with Spark 3. I played them in reverse order just for like to mention. I played 3, then 2, then 1. Spark 3, like I played through the game. I loved it. I enjoyed it so much. It's like a kid who wants to make their own Sonic game, but actually has the tools to make a Sonic game, like story and all. The way that like the story is super like wild and just like random. But the level design and the mechanics, everything just feels so good. I beat the game, and then I spent the next like 3 weeks just playing and replaying levels because Spark 3 was so fun. Spark 2 is good. It's the same kind of game. It's a little less mechanically solid. And the benefit to Spark 3 is that all of the levels of Spark 2 are in Spark 3 once you beat the game. So like Spark 2 goes down a tier just because Spark 3 is so good. Spark 2 doesn't play like a 3D Sonic game, it plays like a 2D Sonic game. But it's also a phenomenal 2D Sonic game, and it's going to go right underneath Spark 3. So like really, if you have the choice, Spark 3 and then Spark, and then if you for some reason want like the story that's only in Spark 2, you can go back and play it. But these are like just kind of rekindling my joy of playing Sonic games was playing Spark 3 and Spark, which we can talk about. The other thing that rekindled my love of playing Sonic games is when the original Sonic Generations came out, it became my favorite Sonic game. I think it's the pinnacle of nostalgia, of classic levels, and of modern levels in terms of the actual level design. I think Sonic Generations levels are like clear Sonic Colors and clear Sonic Unleashed modern levels because they're just so well made. So when Sonic and Shadow Generations got announced, essentially getting a second campaign worth of modern and classic Sonic levels playing as Shadow is just like a recipe for perfection. The games struggle still with its story. The original Sonic Colors story was just like forgettable. It was more about like the nostalgia and putting you in like familiar moments of like, hey, I played a Sonic game, I remember this thing from this game. Shadow tried to do a little bit more by including characters from Shadow's past, but it doesn't like trailblaze any new story for Shadow. It's still like a what if situation brought to life of Shadow's past. Like, what if he could talk to Maria and Robotnik again? What would he say? But like nothing really happens. But the gameplay speaks for itself. I think it goes here in a like high A tier. Bloodborne is going to be interesting because I'm not the Dark Souls guy yet. I played Sekiro a couple years ago, and I really liked it. So like, I tried playing Dark Souls 1 years ago. I fell off of it. I didn't like it. Tried playing Dark Souls 3, I fell off of it for no particular reason. Then I started streaming, and like a year into streaming, I played Sekiro, and I played through the whole thing, and I loved it. I like Sekiro because it has less RPG mechanics and less variety. Like, you just have your sword and your like offhand ability. All of the other Souls games have like a ton of stat building, like a ton of different weapons to use that all have different frame data. And like, I wasn't super excited to jump in, but I did want to play more Souls games. So I figured Bloodborne is people's second favorite. So I figured I would give it a shot. Sekiro is also not cavalier with feedback and information to clown you. It's so good. Yeah. Once something clicks in Sekiro, like for me, the thing that clicked was you're essentially playing like a rhythm game with the enemies by blocking, listening for the sound that the sword attacks clings make, and looking for the sparks that they make, because the different levels of sparks and the different sounds determine if you can keep attacking or if you need to like react to something instead. It was like a really fun ballet of like combat. And so like back to the other traditional Dark Souls games, they don't really tickle that in the same way that I prefer, but I've always heard Bloodborne is one of the best Souls games, so I still wanted to play it. My choices were really between Bloodborne, Elden Ring, and Dark Souls 3. I tried Dark Souls 3 and I still want to try it again, but I didn't want to go back to it. Elden Ring, I'm not the biggest fan of open world games, so like I didn't really want to pick that up. And plus there's like, I don't remember if the DLC was out at the time, but like I like waiting a little while if I'm not like super excited to play a game. That way I can wait for all of the updates and DLC and stuff like that. Bloodborne is like now like it's old. It's at least like 10 years old, isn't it? Came out in like 2016 or something. Well, Elden Ring, there are moments where you see the same patterns, but then there are moments like, this is a shockwave, do you block it, dodge it, jump? Time to guess. Sekiro does not do that. Yeah. The only thing with Sekiro is there's bosses where you can dodge all of their attacks, but like be confused with one attack, and that attack will still like one-shot you. So Sekiro definitely makes things as obvious as they can, because you're actually engaging with attacks by blocking them instead of like dodge rolling a certain way. But there's still enemies in Sekiro. Like I think of the first monkey enemy. He has an attack where he'll like jump up and try to grab you with both arms, and trying to figure out how to dodge that took me so long. I mastered everything else but that one attack, but because that attack one-shots you, I was still just like losing like hours of trying to figure things out. But Sekiro definitely feels a little bit better in that regard. 2014, 2016-ish, yeah. I do feel those moments feel earned, because I'd say there's a point to those moments broadly. It's just that approach to enemy intellect can end up unraveling how the player conceptualizes the game. Yeah. There's a level of fighting / learning the game. Because once I beat Sekiro, I was thinking, this game's gotta be even more enjoyable once you know how to dodge all of the attacks. Because then it's purely about you reacting and frame data and mastering the game. Learning Sekiro bosses was frustrating, but mastering Sekiro bosses was the fun part. Does that make sense? So I feel like it broadly is the same for every Souls game. Like, that is the appeal of Souls games, is mastering the boss fights. It's just, I don't have the patience for a lot of them, because again, I put down the first game, I put down the third game, but like I didn't give up. I still pushed through, played Sekiro, played Bloodborne. So, thoughts on Bloodborne. I liked it. I think there was way too many stupid grinding restrictions. Like, grinding for blood vials was really tedious. I hated like trying to learn a boss, having to stop to grind for a couple hours to get flasks, and then fight the boss again. I feel like if they ever do a remake, they gotta scrap the whole like grinding for blood vials thing. There's just like no reason, because Bloodborne I think gives you the most vials out of any of the games at one time. And they're not entirely like, they don't break the game that you have 20 of them, because enemies still do an insane amount of damage. So like, you're just gonna have a harder time. You're still gonna have a harder time if you start a fight with like 10 blood vials versus 20, but I don't see why they couldn't have just spawned you with 20 every time. I didn't know you played Bloodborne, you're a cool guy now. Yeah. Yeah, I didn't like a lot of the grind. Like it was to be expected. The parts that I don't like about Souls games, aka the grinding and RPG elements, were like things that were in Bloodborne. Things that I just kind of like learned to live with. I begrudgingly did the grinding for blood vials, but the game itself, obviously like Bloodborne has a really high pedigree. I'm not gonna disagree with it. Like the worst I'll say is like I don't really jive with like Souls-like games that much, and like that's just my own personal preference. But Bloodborne was really fun to play through in the moments that were like its highs. The like no notes bosses were Lady Maria, the king that was at the top of the castle. What was the other? Let me look up the boss list. There was like 3 bosses that were like perfect I had no notes for. Other ones were like a little bit like confusing to learn some of their moves. Oh, and Murgo's Wet Nurse was like a perfect fight, like no notes. Any of the other ones were like maybe a little awkward, or like my goal playing Bloodborne was to fight and beat all of the bosses in the main and DLC, not do all of the bosses in the Chalice dungeons. So I ended up doing that. I even beat Orphan of Kos, and I think Lawrence. I think Lawrence is the other one that's like the second hardest boss. So I did my time. I enjoyed the game. I think if I were to rank it as a recommendation, it would have to be at the highest A tier, at the lowest high B tier. And the thing is, I'm also not the Soulsborne guy, so like I think my ranking would be high B tier, but I could see somebody doing like higher, given its pedigree. I think if the remake got rid of grinding for Estus flasks, I could easily put it at A tier. I think that like actually does ruin the experience for like me trying to recommend it to somebody. And like I don't think that's an unfair thing to say. Like I would probably put it at the top of B tier. Alright, we good? We all, like, nobody's mad at me for my Bloodborne takes? I already upset some Mega Man fans today, so take it out. We're good. Let's do, let's say Village DLC. Let's do Firewatch. Firewatch is a narrative-driven... I don't think it's controversial, quite good. Okay, alright. I can keep my, my game review card. Firewatch was really good. I wanted something chill to play after whatever game I played before. I forget what it was, but might have been Bloodborne, honestly. It was a short, really good narrative. I don't have much to say. I play a lot of narrative games, and I don't want to talk about the narratives. It was this dude who like had some loss in his life, and in order to get away from it all, kind of ran away to do like Firewatch in the woods. And you make a friend over the radio, you like weird stuff happens, and then you go through the story and then you leave. But very, very good game. I think I would rank it like up in A tier, probably close to Cosmic Wheel. I think these could be interchangeable, and then we'll like B for Bloodborne, brother. Village DLC was cool. I think Resident Evil Village, the base game, was really good at every level being a different type of horror. And Resident Evil Village gave you like a piecemeal of the same aspect. And more importantly, it kind of continued the Winters storyline. So my favorite Resident Evil game is Resident Evil 7. Obviously, Resident Evil 8 is like continuing Ethan's story, so like I have investment in liking it. I'm curious to see what they do if they're gonna use I'm tired. What's his daughter's name? Family. Rosemary? Oh, Rose. Yeah, of course. Rose. So I'm curious if they're going to use Rose outside of Village, like in a sequel as the main character. I think it's interesting that the DLC time skipped, because I was assuming Resident Evil, what are we on, 9 would have had Rose as the main character. So it's like, is Village Rose as the main character setting up for 9 as Rose as the main character? Or is 7 and 8 the only story about the Winters family and they're going to move on to something else? I think if they were never going to do Resident Evil 9 with Rose, then Village is like an interesting story angle to take the series. Like a short but sweet, like we experience Ethan's story and the DLC gives us the glimpse of like how Rose is gonna like finish her life as a teen / young adult. I mean, gameplay between Resident Evil 7 and 8 and the DLC is like survival horror at some of its finest. It's back to the roots of what made Resident Evil good in the first place. I would put it at B tier. Let's put it at B tier. Let's look at our list and see if I want to move anything. So Persona 3 is a remake of my favorite game of all time. Of course, it's like top of the list, S tier. Metaphor, I told you after I think about it, it might be like top 10 of my favorite games of all time. So I'm going to leave it here. Silent Hill 2 Remake is a remake of, well, like my second favorite game of all time. Last of Us Part 2 is... this is when we start getting detached from my personal favorites. Last of Us Part 2 is just like a phenomenal game, period. Indica is the sleeper hit of 2023. It deserves to be up here. Pseudo Regalia makes sense. Spark. I think I want Pseudo above Spark, but they're about the same. Signalis, Lethal Company, Cyberpunk, Guitar Hero. I think Cyberpunk deserves S tier. A tier, I liked Jusant. That was probably my favorite indie game of this tier. Sonic and Shadow Generations, Inscription, Firewatch. Senua being down here is a little bit of a slight. I think it deserves to be at least here. I like that. I think we're going to put some more shade on Guitar Hero and move that down. And again, the only reason Spark 2 is so far down is because all of Spark 2's levels are in Spark 3, and Spark 3 has better game feel. I like that. Bloodborne at the top. Wanted Dead, I think is like very good, but still flawed. Everhood, Pokemon, Solar Ash, Humanity, Rez, Eden, 3 Castlevania games. Fear and Hunger, Squirrel Stapler, Iron Lung, Slay the Princess. Yeah, let's put Village above Slay the Princess. I like that. Nexomon and Click Holding are the 2 neutral games. And then these are when I actually kind of like stop enjoying playing these games, is Harvestella, Mega Man. Yeah, I think that's good. Okay, so 2.5 hours later, what do you think? These are all of the games that I played in 2023, ranked by do I think they are worth your time? I played a lot of games this year. I hope to play many more next year. Happy New Year's. Cheers. As far as what 2025 looks like, I want to play more video games. I've got MagFest coming up at the end of the year as my first convention. I have a new video that'll be out next week on Wednesday, January 8th is when I plan to do the upload. I'm still working on my Guitar Hero video. It requires me to be good at Guitar Hero, so it's taken me a little while to put out. And then I'm currently playing Pokemon Legends Arceus, and I think there's enough for me to talk about to make a full video, so I already started that. Other than that, I don't really have a lot to add. I think you guys so let me pull up. I'll pull up a quick thumbnail that I made for all of the videos that I made this year. There was a lot of channel growth this year, starting with my video on Beyond the Labyrinth, which I really do think is one of my favorite games I've made. I'm surprised it popped off in the way it did. I think it's got like 33,000 views on it right now. It's sitting at 109,000 views for Beyond the Labyrinth. So that was a video that I put a lot of work into, and I'm glad it paid off. I finally finished off the Virtue's Last Reward 999. I'm tired, if you couldn't tell. The Nonary games. I finally finished the Nonary games. Finally finished the Nonary game series, so it was a treat to make the Zero Time Dilemma video. Rez is the only video that I put out that I think is my favorite video I've ever made that hasn't gotten the attention that I think it should have. So if you haven't watched it, I definitely recommend checking it out. I want to make a lot more videos like that where it's not just on a single game, it's more of like a single idea. Pseudo Regalia was a treat to make a video for. Same with Signalis, even though I got the main character's name wrong, but we're not going to talk about it. We're going to talk about it a little bit, because now I have a stage to talk about it. It's not the first time I've made a video and I've mispronounced the character's name. My Returnal video, I did that. But because my Returnal video, I did that, I specifically looked up Essler's name and took note of how it was spelled. But it must have been a bout of dyslexia or something, because when I went to the Wikipedia page to figure out how it was spelled, when I went to my script to write it down, I must have written it down wrong. So it like double sucks that people called me out on it, and that I checked to make sure that I wouldn't do that, and I still did it. But here we are. Aside from that, I think that's one of the best videos I've ever made. Same with the Mario RPG video. It's Mario RPG, there's like not a lot to talk about. So I think something that I'm learning with Mario RPG onward is to not over explain videos either. I am personally kind of tired of watching like 2-hour long video retrospectives talking about every little detail on a game that I like. So if I'm making a video, I think one of the things going forward that I'm trying to improve about my scripts is making them concise. And I think I did that with Super Mario RPG. So yeah, just thank you for the continued channel growth. Thank you guys for watching. Thank you for tuning into the stream today. I've got more videos planned for 2025. Happy New Year. And that'll do it for today. I think I'll log off and I'll see you guys next time. So bye-bye. Thanks for watching the full video. If you want to support the channel, consider liking, commenting, subscribing, and sharing the video with others. You can find me at Ryan Beardy on social media, as well as Discord with links in the description below.